Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have a single story for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. Before we start that, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. Alright, on to the story. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from You Messed Up 12. New boss destroys everything for everyone. I worked for this tech company for almost 7 years. It was my first job out of college. Great company, huge growth, great benefits, and most importantly, an incredible boss. The boss was super helpful and responsive, always had the team's back, goes out of his way to not micromanage, didn't care as long as the work got done, borderline forced people to take PTO, we have unlimited, and I averaged 30 to 40 days off a year, and believed in giving good workers big raises and promotions. Last 3 years, I got 9%, 13% and a promotion, and 7% raises. We worked remote through COVID, and I asked to change my contract to fully remote so I could leave the H-Call city where the office was based to go back to my hometown. Boss approved the change, and when HR tried to do a call adjustment to my salary, boss told them no because I'll be doing the same work in my new location. The boss was so good that on our team of 16 people, the lowest tenured was 3.5 years. I'd been offered several other jobs with salary increases throughout the years, but could never bring myself to leave. Myself and one other person on my team had specialized into working on very complex and involved projects. These were significantly different than the team's normal day-to-day work. We'd been doing the complex projects for 4+ years and were the knowledge base for the company in that area. Boss left that area completely to us to manage. As the volume picked up, we added and trained 2 more people to our little sub-team to help out. None of these projects went out to the customers without one of us 4 being involved. Super complex, hundred thousands to millions lost if a mistake was made. And since it was the fastest growing part of the business, by far, we were super busy. Now, around 2 years ago, boss's boss gets promoted from his VP role up to an SVP spot, and hires a new VP. This new VP comes in and tries to change a lot very quickly. Tries to make everything a trackable metric, even where it really doesn't make sense. Tracking the number of projects each person on my team did every month. Counted as one, even if it was super complex and took 2 weeks, or if it was very simple with an existing customer and took an hour. Wanted each project to go out faster, even if they weren't due for a week. We were supposed to get them out in under 3 days. Tried to force my boss to assign work to the team instead of us all picking up from a central queue as we could, etc, etc. Boss pushed back as much as possible, but was getting crapped on constantly by new VP because the useless metrics VP wanted us tracked by did not meet his super unrealistic expectations. Despite my boss's team being the most experienced and efficient in the company, and doing significantly more volume and more complex work than any other team. About 9 months ago, boss had enough of just getting consistently crapped on by VP and took a new job and left. Boss had been with the company for 13 years and was one of the first few 100 employees. My whole team was devastated. We all instantly started lobbying for the most tenured person on our team to get promoted into that role, as she would have the same philosophy as the boss that just left. VP interviews most tenured and a bunch of external candidates, and goes with someone from his previous company. Now, this lady will be referred to as Bitch Boss from here on out for soon-to-be obvious reasons. She came in and completely destroyed the team from top to bottom, changed processes that had been perfected for years, did not listen or care about what anyone else had to say, started micromanaging to the extreme. Team morale dropped like a rock. It took less than a month for the team's output to crater due to all of her changes. The team went from best in the company to the worst. It took Bitch Boss about 2 months to get to my smaller sub-team and try to rework our processes. Bitch Boss started micromanaging projects, having no idea what she's doing, and causing all kinds of issues and delays. She started getting on us about our metrics being the worst on the team, despite us working on the super complex projects that took 10 to 100 times longer on average than most of the work the rest of the team did. Bitch Boss told us that if we didn't meet the expected metrics, we would be put on performance improvement plans. So we decided to comply and focused all of our efforts on simple projects to meet the metric, X number of projects completed per month per person, and left the complex ones sitting in the queue. This caused chaos. Very quickly, the sales team is freaking out because deals are getting delayed and their huge commission checks from the complex projects are being put in jeopardy. When they came to us to ask when we were going to complete the complex projects, we all gave the same response. BitchBoss has told us to focus all of our efforts on meeting metric X, so we will only be doing that. Unfortunately, that means we can no longer complete the complex projects. Please contact BitchBoss for help in getting them completed. This did not go over well with her or VP, as he started to get complaints as well. They called a meeting and told us we had to go back to doing the complex projects. We refused, as that made it impossible to meet the metrics they created to measure our performance. They refused to drop the metric, but still insisted we work on the complex ones as we were the only ones with the knowledge. We still refused. This resulted in a lot more complaints from sales until the SVP got involved. The SVP was the one who created the complex sub-team to begin with, and sided with us against the VP and BitchBoss. He said we were not to be measured by the metrics, and can go back to managing the complex stuff without fear of being put on a performance improvement plan. So we did. At this point, the other 3 people on the sub-team had seen the writing on the wall and were all actively applying and trying to leave ASAP. They were all office-based in the H-Call area still. BitchBoss changed the team from come in 1 to 2 days a week as needed to mandatory 3 days in the office. Most company policy would let her. So they got a lot more of her BS than I did remote. I had not been applying because I was distracted. My old boss had approved 2 weeks of vacation for my wedding and honeymoon before he left. This happened to occur about 3 months after BitchBoss started, and about a month after the whole performance improvement plan blow up. BitchBoss was pissed at how we showed her up in front of the SVP and was doing everything she could to make our lives miserable. In that month, the other super experienced guy and my best friend on the sub-team got a new job and left, no notice, and one of the other guys on the sub-team has put in his notice and only had a week left. We were already slammed and still behind from the performance improvement plan fiasco, so losing half the sub-team just made that worse. Plus, with morale so low, we didn't bother to put in any extra effort anymore. In fact, the whole team was significantly behind, as 6 of the 16 people had left or were on their notice periods at that point. So BitchBoss decided that she was canceling my already approved wedding leave because of how far the team was behind. She told me over Zoom. I told her there was no chance I'm missing my wedding and honeymoon for work, and I'm taking the full leave, and it's up to her if she wants to lose another person from the sub-team for 2 weeks or permanently. She BS'd, yelled, and threatened until I just left the Zoom call. She followed up with an email officially notifying me my leave was cancelled, and if I didn't show up, it would be considered job abandonment. I called her bluff and replied, CCing VP and SVP and some other sales VPs who I worked with regularly, explaining the situation. It's my wedding honeymoon, and that I appreciated the opportunity but was quitting immediately with no notice due to the disrespect from BitchBoss. I got Slack messages from SVP and several of the sales VPs almost immediately asking me not to quit. The email chain itself blew up with complaints about how my team was mismanaged by BitchBoss, and how now more complex deals were going to get lost because I wouldn't be there at all to work on them, etc. SVP eventually shut it down, but it was a fun read. I didn't reply to the Slack messages or do any work the rest of that day, just turned everything off and went to a bar and had a good time. I woke up the next day late in the morning and very hungover to a few voicemails on my phone from SVP asking me to call him. I called back in the early afternoon and talked to the SVP. He was very understanding, asked me to come back, listened to all my complaints, and eventually made an offer. Basically, if I came back and worked the rest of the week and tried to train a few team members to work on complex stuff to cover while I was gone, he would give me a $3,000 wedding bonus. I would get my full PTO, and when I got back, Bitch Boss would leave me alone and let me manage the complex stuff and pick 2 more people to permanently train back onto the sub team to backfill what we had lost. I accepted. Weddings are effing expensive, so I tried to train people to cover for me, impossible task, then leave on my PTO. I had a great wedding and honeymoon. VP called me a few times when the 4th guy from my sub team quit with no notice about 1.5 weeks in, but I ignored him and didn't respond. I come back refreshed and ready for the crap show I know is waiting. It was chaos. All the salespeople were slacking and emailing me about all the complex things they needed done 2 weeks ago. The people I quickly trained before leaving hadn't been able to do almost anything. There was a huge backlog for the entire team, as half of the original 16-person team was gone at this point. I turned off my Slack and emailed the sales VPs directly, asking them to give me a prioritized list of all the complex deals they needed done. Got the list and started working through it in my normal working hours, nothing more. Bitch Boss never tried to talk to me or interfere. VP did a few times. At one point, he tried to make me work weekends to catch up. I refused. This went on for about a month or so. Bitch Boss never mentioned me training people to replace my sub team, and I never brought it up. They did, however, have the larger team try some of the smaller complex projects to help get them out. They also hired some new people for the larger team. The normal 4 to 6 month training process my old boss developed was ignored, and the new hires were just thrown in the deep end, which resulted in new hires making mistakes that cost the company a lot of money. This brought us to annual bonus and raise time. I had started frantically job hunting as soon as I got back from the honeymoon. I got some interviews, was in some later stages, but no offers yet. I had a Zoom meeting invite from Bitch Boss to go over my bonus and raise. She decided it would be a great idea to give me 80% of my expected bonus, the lowest possible, and a 0% raise. Justified it with a bunch of BS. Not a team player, metrics bad, blaming me for mistakes made by new hires, etc, etc. I didn't really argue or care at this point. At that point, I really quiet quit. Cut my daily output to below half, just did the bare minimum, and waited for the bonus to come in with my next paycheck 2 weeks later. At this point, the sales team is getting pissed because the complex stuff basically isn't getting done. I had almost caught up on the important ones before the raise and bonus, but with me barely working, everything was falling behind again. Bitch Boss smelled weakness and showed up on one of the progress calls I had with sales. The project was running about 1.5 weeks behind at that point. She started chewing me out on the call in front of everyone, saying I was lazy and not doing my job, etc. I let her rant, then just said, if you give me the lowest bonus possible and a 0% raise, you get 0% effort in return. You can complete this project since I'm so terrible at my job. And I left the call. She tried a few more times on email chains, etc. to call me out for not working, and I just replied with the same thing. I refused to join her Zoom calls or respond to her on Slack, and just responded with the 0% effort blurb on every email. This infuriated her. I still hadn't gotten another job offer, but was really confident I was about to get one soon. So when VP set up a Zoom call with me, I joined. He tried to play nice and ask what the problems were and pretended to be on my side. I told him for a 0% raise, I'm giving 0% effort. And he pretended like he had no idea how I ended up with that raise and bonus. He has to approve the bonus and raise amounts. I called him out on his BS and told him he gets what he pays for. He then threatened to fire me if I didn't go back to my old level of output and said the people I had been training in complex projects could take over for me soon, so I wasn't as necessary as I thought. I laughed and asked him what he was talking about. I hadn't been training anyone. He went quiet and muted. He was clearly messaging Bitch Boss asking about the training, because he unmuted a few minutes later and changed his entire attitude. Agreed it was awful of Bitch Boss to do that to my bonus and raise, and asked what he could do to make it right. I didn't care at that point, and knew he needed me more than I needed him, so I told him I need a 25% raise and 150% of the bonus on that new salary, or I was quitting immediately. He tried to say that was ridiculous and could never happen, etc., etc. So I bluffed and told him I already had another job offer and was leaving anyway. He asked me to wait and he'd bring SVP onto the call. SVP tried to talk my demand down. At that point, I realized it wasn't worth it. I refused the significantly lower counteroffer, thanked the SVP for everything he did for me, and said I was quitting immediately. VP tried to say I'll never get a good reference if I don't at least work a notice period. I just told him my ex-boss would give me a glowing recommendation of my time here, so I didn't care, and I logged off. SVP tried to get me to come back a few times over the next week or so, but I refused. A few weeks later, I got a job offer and accepted. I've been working at the new company for a while now, and it's pretty crappy. Better than the old company, but nowhere close to what I had before with my old boss. Although old boss reached out and said he might have a position opening up in his new company in a month or two that I should apply for, so I'm looking forward to that. I've heard from people who are still on my old team that it's a complete disaster at my old job. They are losing millions from not having the knowledge base to correctly complete the complex projects. They reached out to the other experienced guy from the sub-team and offered him a huge raise to come back after I quit. He refused. Everyone left on my old team is trying to leave ASAP, and everything, even the simple stuff, is weeks overdue. Apparently, Bitch Boss is getting thrown under the bus by VP and will be fired soon. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Pattern Matched. It says, they got off cheap with a $3,000 wedding bonus. If these were $1 million plus deals that are in jeopardy, those sales reps could possibly be losing tens of thousands of dollars, maybe even $100,000 plus on commission. This is a great chance to do some high-priced consulting for your former employer. Stories like this, where you charge 2 to 5 times more per hour, aren't uncommon. Another commenter down below called PostCards said, SVP is a fool and a failure as a manager. Leaving Bitch Boss as your boss, but telling her to stay out of your way was nonsense. She's either your boss or she isn't. If you're to be responsible for hiring, training, and managing, that makes you the manager. You should have asked for her job, title, and salary. Structural failures require structural solutions, not band-aids. SVP's offer was obviously no solution. It couldn't work because he didn't change anything. He should have removed you and your team from Bitch Boss's reporting chain. Bitch Boss gets a different job or no job, but she doesn't get to keep mismanaging you to the point of disaster for the company. Further, VP was responsible for hiring Bitch Boss over better qualified internal candidates. That began the destruction of the department, which he allowed to continue. That's structural failure number 2. VP should also be removed from your reporting chain. SVP should have shifted you and the entire team to himself or to a different VP. 3 incompetent levels of management, each refusing to do its job. I've got a question for everybody listening and watching this one right now. Does this sound like corporate sabotage to you people? These 2 people came in around the same time. The VP hired somebody from their own company. I have a hard time believing that they were just incompetent enough that everything fell apart below them. It almost feels like they were there on behalf of the competition to make this place fall apart and lose millions in contracts. Going back to OP, I'm really glad you were able to get in contact with your old boss, the one that you really enjoyed working for, and I really hope that the old boss can find you a new spot on their current team. I think that would be best for you, not only for your career, but for your mental health as well. Did you know every KCC video is also produced in podcast form? You can search for Karma Comment Chameleon on every major podcasting platform. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.